The emotional, the rational should complete. Music making, of course, is sensorial, deeply moving, a language of its own, like poetry can't be translated. Analytically, the meaning, possibly the ingredients, eventually the affects, but the combination of the composer's inner ear imagining through their soul and experience and heart and whatever complexity or simplicity they choose for the expression to reach us psychologically by a phrase, a melody like unforgettable perfume of somebody you love, something you can't and you shouldn't try to explain or define, except that when you perform it and you teach it, therefore, for a student for whom it means the world, to express every little emotional intensity which is embedded, and you try to find a rational way to define for the student what are the layers of structural organization of the direction of the line, of the choice of the voicing. In other words, you cannot bring everything out on an instrument like the piano where you have a decay, even if musically you don't hear it in the intensity of the expression compared to an orchestration where the choices of the instrumentation of producing the sounds of wind, brass, strings, woodwinds, percussion, combining, talk to us psychologically. Here we do it more by voicing and suggested depth of perhaps three-dimensionality of sorts in music. But inevitably it becomes then a choice that is no more perhaps the one of the composer, and no matter how much we want or should want to find out through the edition of the teacher or the articles or the options to exchange with people who have been through these experiences of a piece, what it means exactly to play what the composer really intended, we end up always in the problem that we end up by playing or performing, therefore, what it means to us. It's more like watching myself in the mirror and making sure I look like I would like to project I do. That's, of course, a very superficial comparison compared to the depth of a soulful situation where the mirror of a piece reveals you through, you become the membrane of this composer's thought, but nevertheless you play in front of people or for people in place or at distance, and therefore you play for him, the her, the them, the it, the musical experience itself of doing it, and besides what it represents emotionally, intensely, logically, if you're in awe of its structure, construction, or of its emotional drive that touches you so directly to your soul, and that you want to translate all this through your playing to the audience, inevitably it's filtered by you, so it's no more the mirror of the piece directly to the piece. From you to the piece is a dialogue between the composer and you, or the aesthetics or the texture of the composer's notation that you try to read into how to play this unmeasured grace note compared to the bass line that it's supposed to represent, and why did the notation choose to take this in that hand compared to the other. Is it just the composer's own hands? Is it just like parents who know their children better, but then somebody finds them in the other seasons of their life and thinks they know them better? We discover the pieces in this analogy after the composer, way after, and they become so meaningful to us as if it's ours. But perhaps we betrayed loving it the way we do. And perhaps it's necessary to betray it in order to be perhaps evolving in our understanding of it through the inevitable path of life, where we think, why did I privilege the pulse or the rhythm or the phrasing, and now I should the harmony, or perhaps the combination, and this pedaling doesn't bring out, and this fingering could shape the phrasing that way, and I shouldn't follow this, I should go further. And inevitably the reflection is the opposite of the intuition, of the spontaneity. And if you try to regain the two, as I said earlier, I try so much to bring the rational and the inspirational, the same combined uh, product. And all these are words, and all these are concepts, and all these are hopes as a teacher to leave an impact, or seeds in the garden of a student who, through their own life path as performers, teachers, recording artists in turn, will develop another way of hearing that the same piece, not necessarily by provocative ways to be different for the sake of it, but just to correspond to their own understanding of the path of the piece within their lives as a informed, at that point, more informed artist than when the younger met the piece for the first time. And of course, you have the great gods and goddesses of the instrument who play it in a way that it reveals it to you. Then you study it and you try to play it, and then you have a teacher helping you to organize your knowledge about how to handle it, how to manage to escape most of the, let's say, traps that are embedded, depending how to handle it with your own hand, etc. And so beyond all that comes the moment of filtering it. It's like tea leaves inside that macerate inside you musically in this, your soulful knowledge of the piece. And then in turn you discover a student coming to play it for you and bringing to you completely different approach to it that you perhaps never even thought about in this own evolution of yours with the piece as a time companion who reveals himself or herself differently through time. And you have to accept that you change. Perhaps the way you approach things changes, and the instruments hearing the approach of the combination of the harmonies, the melodies, the rhythm, the pulse, which one and how much, the hierarchy of elements, the blending, and the capacity to hear it phenomenologically layered or just combined at certain point, very subjective according to what you want to bring to the piece in your playing, even if it's not personally totally matching the notation or the different editions, like many doctors who give you different reasons for what is your pathology, and the same thing with teachers and performers. And at some point you hear all these and you decide, I have to do what I really think it means to me to do. And the beauty of it is that then you discover it through a student that in fact perhaps you were blinded by a certain aspect of it that meant to you so much that you didn't see another way. Of course, it's easy to reject it and say, oh no, it's not supposed to be like that. Or you could say, really? And then try to take the time to receive it and to be humble enough to not overlap on it your awareness, your knowledge of it, and your reasons for which this rubato is there and not there, and how much, where it leads to and how you organize it, but also how you feel it. And doesn't necessarily mean that you want to just bring out the intellectual path of the piece, which is embedded in the expression, but also the musical content of its storytelling drive. So all these are phenomenally complex situations that are hinted. Sometimes they're meant, sometimes they are overestimated, overimposed in the teaching or the performance, and they erase other aspects of it. It's in the eye of the beholder what you see in the painting, but then it's up to you when you restate it during the time you play it. You become not the composer, but the co-imaginer. As C.P. Bach used to say, fantasieren am Klavier, imagine on the keyboard, rather than spielen, which in German meant, of course, like in most languages, play. the aspect of imagining is that what it is. It triggers your imagination. It's like reading a book, what you imagine the characters, and if you see them portrayed in a film adaptation, they match or not your imagination, and you can accept or reject it. But in any case, your imagination is way more subtle and without to be necessarily visually displayed or therefore organized in a structural analysis, which brings you to know better where you go through the piece and how the piece has an end that you know at the get-go, but you go through the storytelling as if you fake that you don't, which is what actors do in theater plays. But the process is what matters, and therefore how you organize that is how you feel it and what you value in it and what you choose to bring out, and therefore the readability of your performance is also what you took from the text that you read. And I find it ultimately musical translation of the reading for what you received and how you transmit it. And of course, many students, many pianists, when they start the first note, it doesn't correspond to how they imagined it in the idealization of their inner world, just like the characters imagined in the book that you read. And then all of a sudden it becomes real in the first performed note, and it's often rejected like, no, I don't want it like this, it's too much, not enough, or something. And so that moment where you try to connect to it and to become magnetically connected by your concentration to the storytelling of the pieces and its structural choices of secondary voices that you don't choose to ignore unless they're revealed to yourself by hearing somebody bringing them, and you choose to do less or more or ignore. So many aspects of the texture can be imposed, but ultimately the student leaves the room, and then they will keep or not what they will of it. And that's the humility of the teacher to accept that, because we're not here to remote control the performance according to our wishes. It's so much more meaningful to bring to understand why they choose to do what they do. It defeats sometimes the purpose to believe in it, because you think my experience should overpower their inexperience. It's inevitably asymmetrical, but the experience doesn't replace the intensity of the intuitive approach. I think it should hopefully not replace it, but complete it. That's the hardest combination of balancing the charismatic meaning of a statement that this musical few notes frozen on some document coming alive under your fingers bring you to dig into that sense of truth for you.